In this HeyRamp video, we'll talk about how to do effective performance reviews. Now, to start out, the purpose of performance reviews, and most important part of it, is initially to make sure, one, you get better performance outcome from your staff consistently. The second aspect is making sure that you get a good performance evaluation and follow-up on a regular basis with your staff. And the third core purpose is to make sure that when you're giving people salary increases, they're based on a just process and they're given with a great process in the back. So by doing and setting up a solid performance review, that enables you to make sure that your team is measured in a consistent manner across the board. And it makes sure you have a good solid process for understanding, one, what people are paid versus they perform, and making sure that when you are giving salary increases, that they matches the contribution of various individuals. Now, what does the process normally look like? So the way we recommend doing the performance review process is starting out by creating a template for your team. Now, depending on the team, those templates might be slightly different because the way you evaluate a salesperson might be very different than the way you evaluate a customer service person. So generally, to setting up your questions, if you're utilizing HeyRamp, there's an opportunity to add in multiple types of question. The first one is a question with multiple answers. So you can have from a scale to 1 to 5, how good was the performance the last 12 months? For example. You can also have questions that just need a verbal answer. So for example, you could have a question like, what is the number one thing or the number one skill that you want to develop in the coming year? So you can have multiple types of questions that you can put together. Now, a lot of clients currently uses ChatGPT to find out for the current role, what is the best kind of questions. We have some default templates in the system, but for you and what you feel is most important for your staff, it can be very beneficial to go in and create your own template that you can utilize with your staff. The second step of the process is to review the performance from the past period. So again, with the performance review, some companies do them quarterly, some every 6 months, and many do it yearly. So you want to review the performance over the last period of time. Now the benefit is if you're doing consistent one-to-ones within HeyRamp, you will have all the data easily available so that you can see the performance over the period of time. One of the things that many managers have struggled with is remembering what happened. So very often performance reviews has often been based on the last 2 to 3 months of performance because that's what's top of mind. But if you have been doing your one-to-ones and you have really good performance overview for example, the entire year, that gives you much better data and it gives you a much more fair and just evaluation of the entire year's performance that helps you evaluate everything. Now, after you've evaluated the performance, typically you go to the next step, which is answering the questions from yours as the manager's perspective. So both you and the employee will answer the questions on the employee's performance. And as you go through it, you want to be as honest and as direct as possible. And you want to make sure that any feedback and any questions that you answer with as much detail as you can to make sure the feedback and the comparison is specific. After you've completed that, the employee will usually get an email as well to complete the same document. And as they go through all the answers as well, eventually when they're complete, you as the manager will be able to see the comparison side by side of exactly what the scores are for each of you. And you can see the difference in scoring and you can see the comments from both of you. And this will really enable you to look through all of those answers and look through the comparison and figure out exactly what agenda you want to have for the performance review. So obviously in the questions where you agree, where performance is great, you both agree it's great, etc., you might not need to spend so much time on. But there might be areas where either the employee think they're significantly better than they are, or they think they're significantly worse than they are. And those might be areas that you really want to discuss and look at to see what improvements can be made or see where the difference in understanding comes in, right? We see regularly that employees tend to overestimate a little bit where it is they are. And the good thing is if you've been using HeyRamp for one-to-ones, that often help give the employees a more realistic view. However, that is typically top-level performance. Again, the performance in the other areas is still depending on the manager, consistently giving them feedback and helping them understand how they're performing. The final step is doing the actual review. Now, the key steps in the review process, or the key part of the review itself, is to make sure that you sit down, you have dedicated time for it, and that you make sure that you're not overly rushed, right? Performance reviews is one of the most important aspects for your employees, and it is one of the most important aspects for you as a leader and as a manager. Because reality is, going through a performance review, particularly if it's done yearly, but even if it's 6 or 3 month review, is very big for the employee. They want to understand where they stand. They want to understand how they can be better. And this is a great opportunity to work through that and really make sure that you give them as much to work with as possible. So typically, we would run through the agenda, and I'll show and share any kind of discrepancies, particularly in the scoring. We'll also talk about the points where we hit the same scores, but generally want to review and go through what it is they see in themselves, what it is you see in them, particularly the area for improvement and the areas where they're doing fantastically well already. Now, this can typically help you put together both action plans, but also specific goals for the future, right? So typically in the performance review, we plan a cycle ahead. So if you're doing it on a yearly basis, we try and look at what does the next 12 months look. So for your performance, for example, what does the next 12 months look like? Where is it we would like you to be? What is the performance we would like to see from you? And what are the sort of core development points? A lot of this is obviously going to be largely dependent on the employee. So the employee needs to take ownership. They need to make things happen, both when it comes to the development and their performance and so on. But obviously, as a manager, your goal is to support them as much as you can and really make sure that from your managerial standpoint that, they have the right level of resources. Sometimes, for people's development, you might need to contribute as a company or as a manager to the resources. So sometimes people need courses, sometimes they need training and so on. And that can be a great scenario to talk through what those points are. Lastly, if it's also an evaluation of salary and you want to tell them what level of salary increase you want to give them, this is also a great conversation. Again, because you have very good performance data for the entire year or for the entire cycle, depending on the cycle, this really gives you great data as a manager to talk with the employee about. Now, generally, I don't want to compare people, so I don't want to say, Bob is better than you are, or you're better than Bob. But obviously, because you see the performance data for the entire team, you obviously have a good view of where does each individual stand and where does each person fall within that, right? So when you're doing a performance review with someone somewhere in the middle, you have a good idea where they sit in the team, and hopefully that will help reflect as well when you're giving, for example, a salary increase and so on. So that's typically the process of the performance review itself. When you're finished with the review, you have completed the actions going out of it, you have agreed on the goals for the following period, and at the end, you always give a clear performance evaluation. So you write down specifically the feedback from both of you, and you give the final score for the performance review. After this, as long as you're utilizing the one-to-ones as well as the performance review, what will automatically happen is that the agreed tasks, so the agreed actions and the agreed goals from the performance review will automatically flow into your one-to-ones so that you remember to follow up on these consistently. This is very, very helpful because one of the key things we saw with a lot of organizations was that the goals and the actions that was agreed at performance reviews never actually materialized, and very often what happens was at the next performance review, people couldn't really remember what was actually agreed the previous time. So the benefit here with HeyRamp is that you have the ability to see what was agreed, you have the clear goals and guidelines, and you have the clear action follow-ups, and they actually directly feed into your one-to-one process that will enable you to consistently make sure that you're following up on these, and when you get to the following performance review, you will actually have been tracking the goals throughout, and you don't suddenly come and say, oh, well, nothing happened at this point, because you've been talking about it on a regular basis. So this is how simple our performance review process is, and this is how simple you can make sure that your organization have a great, consistent performance review process across the board, where you, wherever level you're at, can ensure that the team is getting a fair treatment when it comes to the performance review, and make sure that the team is generally evaluated based on a consistent performance over time.